I should have like intro music, but I've not figured that out yet. We actually have a streaming person now who's much better at this, and so hopefully she's going to share all her expertise. But I see our faces, so this is a good sign. And hopefully my wife has remembered to be my QA agent today. She's always double checks that you can hear me because every so often I forget to change the gain on my mic, and then you can't hear me anymore. But
Okay,
good evening, Sam. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, a bit down for obvious reasons.
I,
Thanks
I,
to
I can't
T-shirt.
imagine. Well, I mean, I wore
Like
this in support.
this is what I'm assuming. I'm assuming it's a supportive thing, but
Yeah,
yeah, a little bit down, a little bit
yeah,
down. I've been cheerier.
understood.
So I during the game I dealt with it by emptying the dishwasher 2 or 3 times. Didn't need
Checks out.
emptying, 'cause that's how I deal with the nerves. And
Yeah,
I took the bins out twice.
good. Did you
Bins
clean
don't
your
even go
dishwasher?
out.
I mean,
This was just distraction.
yeah.
And now, of course, I actually feel a lot better now that we have actually lost,
Okay,
because the tension's over,
sure.
and it's the hope that kills you. So I've just, you know, that's it. This
Spoken
is
as a
sort of
true
thing.
England fan.
Yeah, well, we were discussing earlier. Give your own sporting
Yeah, yeah.
experiences mirror mine somewhat, living where you do.
Hmm.
So I've just shifting all of my allegiances to different sports now.
That's all you can do.
Hence hence repping the South Sydney Rabbitohs, who are a rugby league team who play out of South Sydney in Australia. You should watch. Rugby league is the best rugby, as far as I'm
Okay.
concerned. It's much closer to NFL, right? In terms of how there's some stylistic similarities
Yes.
with it.
Yes.
So
I will admit, when I was in Sydney, I did attempt to watch at least a couple of these several different variants on football that exist in Australia, and it just seeked to confuse me even more. Especially the one that seemed to have about 30 people on the field, and it looked like it was played on a cricket pitch, and kind
yeah,
of guys were walking on and off and bringing water. I
that's
mean, I
AF,
was very
yeah,
confused.
that's what's called AFL. So that's Aussie rules, which is there's an also which was and it is played on a cricket pitch. It was literally the sport they invented. It was a sport they came up with to keep cricketers fit in the winter months. That's why they play
Checks
on
out.
cricket pitches.
Okay.
And some of the stuff they do is crazy, like athletically. There's a very similar sport in Ireland, which is Gaelic football.
Hmm.
So with my Irish side, Gaelic footballs, and so they actually sometimes have like a crossover. The sports are a bit different. Like Gaelic football plays with a round ball, whereas AFL plays with like what looks like a small rugby ball.
Hmm.
I've watched several games and I have no idea what's going on with AFL. So
Well,
yeah.
I don't understand cricket either, and I've tried, and I get it. I think some sports you just have to grow up with to truly get it.
I think there's also some sports where there's an experiential element.
Yeah.
Like I find baseball to be quite dull. It's
Yes.
more interesting when you're actually there.
100%.
And
So is
I
hockey,
think
by the way.
geographically,
It would be weird if they somehow had managed that.
I
Our
mean,
women might, because they're pretty good, but not the men's
look, both
stuff.
Australia and Israel are in Eurovision, so
Yeah.
don't say it couldn't happen
That's
because
true.
it kind of could.
Yeah.
So I saw someone on Twitter yesterday getting very annoyed that England were in the Euros because of Brexit, and it's like, well, these are unrelated bodies, and
Yes.
like the Ukraine and Russia are in the Euros as well, and anyway, I decided not to get involved in a conversation on Twitter around the football yesterday.
Smart.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it strikes
put my
me
phone
that
down.
it's a very expansive view of what we mean by Euro, right?
Well, it's the continent. It's
There you
literally
go.
the tectonic plate. It's the Eurasia tectonic plate, which technically goes all the way to Iceland, like half of Iceland,
Sure.
because Iceland obviously theoretically could qualify for the Euros. That's actually that's the nice thing. You go to Iceland, you can actually see where the European tectonic plates and the America's tectonic plates meet, and you can actually literally go to the fissure. So it's kind of cool. You should go.
You have been there, as I recall.
I've been there multiple times. I got married actually where the two plates meet. It's a fantastic place. Love it. It's great. Really close flight from the US. I think it's like a 2 or 3 hour flight from where you are.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
And it's a pretty safe country COVID wise right now as well. And nice people. It's a really interesting place because like the second biggest industry is aluminium smelting. And there's no aluminium mining in Iceland. It all comes from Australia. They put it on boats. They send it to Iceland because the energy is basically
Free.
cheap to free.
Right.
And that's how it happens. So
Okay,
a lot of
checks out.
data center work up there as well. So
There you go. Checks out. So how have you been? It's been far too long since you and I have had a chance to hang out. We were chatting a little bit earlier that's one of the downsides of this whole pandemic world. I normally
Mm.
would have run into you multiple times by now.
And none of those would be planned because
No,
we would know that we would bump into each other like 3 to 4 times a year on
right,
average,
right.
because we would be at an event and you'd be at the event, and then we go get dinner.
Okay.
And that's serendipitous, meeting of people has gone for me as well. And I guess it's a much sort of more simple form of what people miss from not going into the office.
Right.
Right. So you think people now adjust to that. I was working in an office and I could rely on just bumping into each other or overhearing a conversation. Whereas now when you work remote, you've got to create situations where that happens. It's like my son, who was until recently just working from home from our house, and he sort of did a paid internship. It was his first programming job. And he'd never worked in an office as a programmer. But this company had gone online now, gone virtual, but they would effectively create like these half-hour meetings where they would just literally, they would have almost like a random number generator and said, okay, your half an hour this week is with these two other people. And they just tried to kind of almost like recreate those ad hoc, and you just have a chat for half an hour.
Right.
But that was during your working day, and it was considered part of work to go along to. But they're at least trying to create that serendipitous conversation. It's one of those things I think we have to be much more conscious,
Right.
and like you can't really assume it's going to happen. You have to consciously, like what you've done here is make this conversation happen.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It has to be something that you seek out, that you plan. It can't just be the ad hoc, we happen to bump into each other. And that's an interesting idea of sort of putting people in that situation where they are going to randomly, have a conversation. I think that's actually a really good idea. And, I do think we were chatting before we hopped on here that I'm really curious to see what normal looks like in, let's just say 22, since this year's already July. Did you figure that out? It's July. Like where did this year go?
I mean, it's been a long and also a very short year
Right?
in many respects. I mean, I'm just tracking time based on which lockdown I'm in right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're just about to come out of lockdown 3 here in the UK. I give it about 3 months, 2 months at most before we enter lockdown 4.
Sure.
Based on how the numbers are going. So it's like epochs, right? This feels like that's what's going on. But yeah, it's. We're not flying blind, right? Because there were companies already that were highly online, right? There are companies out there. I think it was JetBlue, who, like in the US, for example, a lot of their customer service staff were actually people working from home. They've been doing that for years. I think companies like Stitch Fix as well, like have huge workforces working from home. So we're not totally flying blind.
Right.
I think what we're starting to see, though, is senior leadership kind of recognizing the fact that actually they've got to change how they work.
Right.
I think the people on the ground kind of work this stuff out, but like when you've got a CEO who expects to be able to see people and like micromanage and shout at them, they just that's going to be the interesting stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I live in the middle of the country, and I am seeing house prices going up. I'm seeing people from London moving down here.
Sure.
And that's been happening over the last 18 months. So I think these things are already happening.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we're starting to see migrations of people out of some of these cities, and it's interesting to see how it's not just computer folks. I was talking to someone about this, that a lot of their HR people have now moved out of the proverbial 50-ish mile radius. And forever we always thought, well, no, HR has to be there because you have to have these conversations. Well, if we're moving HR people in some cases to different countries, then that I think tells us that ship has sailed. Now, to your point, it'll be fascinating to see how long it takes some of those senior, but this is how we've always done it, manager type people, get over themselves a little bit there. But I've always thought it's funny. They had a pretty flexible definition of the office anyway. So
the golf course, the bar,
Davos.
Yeah,
exactly.
You clearly hang out with much fancier management types
No,
than I do.
no,
If you're imagining you're going to Davos, it's like
for me, Davos sounds. Yeah. See, I don't have a private jet, so
I'm just saying, year isn't over yet. Like, you never know what the future might hold.
That's a good point. Yeah. When you were talking about lockdown number one, lockdown number three, I was immediately thinking, I hope this doesn't become like Fast and Furious movies, where I don't know. I think there's 30 of them now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I think they got good around 5. I think the
Yes.
5th one is really where they found their niche.
Yes.
I'm actually literally on Thursday. My wife and I love those films for all the right reasons. They're terrible, but they're awesome.
Right. Right.
And so I saw a brief review, which is F9 makes Moonraker look like a documentary.
Ooh.
So I'm really looking forward to how bad it is. But like, so maybe I reckon by lockdown 5, like I think maybe we'll hit our stride, right? We'll got to feel like a great franchise. We'll start making money at it. At the moment, it's like, I don't know. The analogy doesn't quite hold up.
No. Well, it's funny because I watched them with my son, and after watching the first one, I'm like, I don't know how they made a second one. But to your point, they did kind of start getting good, and I don't know if they got the right mix of people in there or what, but I as I vaguely understand from the trailers, apparently Dom has a brother, and for a franchise that has emphasized family so much, I'm really interested to see how they weave in this brother. That
but yeah, not to mention somebody who has died. In 2 previous films, this person was very much dead, and is now back, and they spilled that in the freaking trailer. It's like, what the? Anyway,
no,
this wasn't.
agree.
I mean, we probably should move on, because otherwise I might start talking about my abiding love for Jason Statham and how I'm hoping the Hobbs and Shaw is the next big thing, because I've got a lot of time for Statham.
But that's
more of that. Oh yeah, that's probably a bit off topic for what you had in mind for the session today.
Oh no, I have no agenda. I have questions that I can fall back on, but in the perfect world, I never look at any of them and we converse. So I can't help but notice you've got a Baby Yoda over your shoulder, and that makes me very happy, because I have Baby Yoda tiki glasses, very fond of.
Yeah, so on it's a bit blurry, I know, but I've got a baby. I've got Groku, and I've got little Mando down here.
Nice.
And I've got Hellboy, a Hellboy vinyl figure.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I had a blank wall behind me before, and like I've seen other people like put their books and stuff up there, and it's like, so this is sort of about as much weight as my shelf can take at the moment. So I try and rotate it every now and then. This is the one plant in the house I haven't killed as well, which is doing really well. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we only have one plant in the house now too, but that's because we have cats, and the cats make snacks out of the plants. So that has shrunken our abilities a bit there. But so what do you make of Disney's stewardship of the Star Wars franchise and their Mandos and things of that nature?
I think they're trying different things, which I think is good.
Yeah.
I kind of the Mandalorian. I absolutely adore the Mandalorian. I think it's the best things I've seen. But I'm a big Western fan. I'm a big fan of Westerns, and a lot of the samurai films and stuff that obviously inspired Star Wars originally, right? The Kurosawa films inspired the original Star Wars and things. So I really like that, and I thought that was they did a great job with that. Good casting, really well put together. Loved it. Liked most of the last 3 films as well. The middle one was my favorite of the 3, but the last one felt like they'd almost gone out and done a market. It's almost like I did a bit of market research. How can we make sure we tick as many fanboys boxes as possible, rather than making a good film? But so yeah, positive. Like I mean, if they keep that quality bar up for the Mandalorian and for the other ones, then really positive. Because it's like hey, look, the Marvel stuff. I love Marvel films. I mean, I've been reading those comics since about 6.
Yeah.
They've done not every film's Thor Ragnarok or the Black Panther, but some of them are pretty good.
Right.
And WandaVision, bloody excellent. So it's like I'm
so good.
But I kind of hope that by opening it up a little bit, it will allow them to take a few risks, maybe. I mean, it's still very mainstream risks. It's not. They're not trying to make Dark or anything like that. But it's like, have you watched Dark, by the way?
Which one, sorry?
Have you seen? There's a Netflix show called Dark. It's a German time travel science fiction thing, which is just. I mean, it's really adventurous, and you need either a temporal or a graph database to keep track of all the. It's really kind of cool. But like, I don't expect mainstream stuff to do adventurous things like that. But yeah, so positive, very positive. And I think some of the whiny man babies can get stuffed as far as I'm concerned.
Somebody's unhappy on the internet. I'm shocked. I just
Yeah,
think it's fascinating to see how they can change that storytelling by taking what amounts to, at least from my view, a movie-like approach, except we're going to do it in a 6, 7, 8, 9 series kind of episodic approach. And I think it's really interesting to see, where they go with that and how they keep tying all these things together.
Well, this sort of hit me back when I first saw The Wire, was that what they nailed with The Wire is what comic books have done forever. So if you look at a lot of especially the continuing comic book series, each issue of a comic book has to stand by itself and yet also fit within an overarching arc. And so I follow a couple of comic book authors and watch their read their newsletters and stuff. And they'll talk about how, okay, I've got an arc. It's going to be a 10-issue arc. I know where we're going with each one of those issues. And, this is how I'm sketching it out. And that saying, you saw that with The Wire, which was kind of very different to a lot of procedural cop shows, which was you could watch an episode by itself, but it all hung together.
Right.
And so it is that there is a narrative through line and they've plugged it all together. And you felt like they go into it knowing where they're going to start and knowing where they're going to end of each of those series. And that's, I think, why it works really well. We won't talk about the last season of Game of Thrones, obviously, because
because they rushed, damn it. I don't know why they felt the need to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's also like I think it's like one of those like there's a kind of I saw this really distilled really well, nicely by a screenwriter, and they said there's some people that write character driven and there's some people that write story driven, and with the story driven approach you often know where you're going, and then you kind of make the characters work within that framework, but where you're going. With character-driven stuff, and that's sort of apparently really is how Game of Thrones is written, you almost set up the characters and you put characters in a situation, and then almost like the characters drive where the story goes. And the problem with that is it can often be great and much more naturalistic, but you don't know where they're going to end up.
Right.
This is where you hear authors saying, I don't know how it's going to finish, because they really, in their heads, they have those characters. And it felt to me like Game of Thrones was always that sort of thing. And yeah, they maybe just kind of rushed it a little bit. And then what you ended up doing was going from something that was character driven to doing something that was very much, we need to land this.
Right.
But it was the doing things that weren't true to the characters that really just knocked me off about that. Not in a big way. Again, you know what? It's business. I'm not going to start crying about it.
Right. Do you think we'll ever get the rest of the books in that series, or do you think that ship has sailed?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like as somebody who's written nonfiction books can tell you, I have deadlines and stuff like that. I'm quite a deadline-driven person, but there's still a creative side to that, and it's I don't know. I mean, ultimately, he's not our bitch.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
There's something like he owes it to us. No, he doesn't. Grow up. Do what the hell he wants.
That's right. So and he has enough money now too that he's like, I really don't care. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
He's not going to starve based on whether or not he finishes these books.
And it does make you worry that if he gets stuck doing it, that actually, again, having its own praise. I think human beings, we have a certain amount of creative energy at any given point in time. And if you're stuck on that, he's not putting that creative energy somewhere else.
Right.
Like he could be doing loads of other great things. You see people like Neil Gaiman or Stephen King who don't tend to do series. They do one-off things. And I think that's great. So there'd be a lot of pressure and a lot of financial reward to doing continuing series. For them, it allows them to go and put that brand new creativity into the next thing they do.
Right.
And that's freeing, and they do more things as a result. So, I don't know. It was great. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not that bothered, to be honest with you. I know how the War of Roses finished, and so that's fine. I'm okay with the whole thing. But it doesn't really bother me that much. I mean, I've got no real interest in the prequels either.
Sure.
But there's so many good things to watch.
Isn't that part of the challenge? We are faced with almost limitless content, and just last night, my son asked me again, when are we going to rewatch Ted Lasso? And not for the second time, by the way. It'll be for the third time because the new season comes out. I believe it's the
Yep.
23rd, if my memory
23rd July.
serves.
Yep.
Thank you. And I, by your nodding, I can see that you also have found the Ted Lasso.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I I don't think I've seen anything that was as perfect for the time as Ted Lasso when I discovered it. I've never seen so many laugh out loud funny lines. Rewind, watch it again, still laugh out loud, and then watch it a second time, and it's still like fall off the couch funny.
It's the like there are basically, if I think about my favorite sitcoms that I have watched again and again and again, the two of the American ones that stand out are Parks and Rec and Schitt's Creek, and
Yes.
Schitt's Creek obviously being Canadian, but um, the thing that's kind of I always liked about those, it's like in the UK here, we've got Gavin and Stacey, right? They're not cynical, they've
Mm-hmm.
got genuine heart, and they're funny.
Yeah.
And like I tried rewatching 30 Rock recently, and I love 30 Rock, and that doesn't hold up, and it's
Yeah.
really nasty in parts. Whereas like Ted, like, it's just genuine and funny, and it's got great heart. I loved it, absolutely perfect. So Parks and Rec, I've done I think 4 full watch throughs. Schitt's Creek, I'm
Wow.
on to my third,
Wow.
but just kind of love the show. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. But yeah, so I think it's absolutely perfect, and I think they've done a really good job. It's just a shame so few people have got to see it because there's not enough stuff on that. I mean, I'm only watching it because I got a free Apple TV subscription with my phone, right? So that's why I'm watching it. And it's like, yeah, this is perfect.
No, I think it's one of the best things that's come out in a long time, and I'm sad to know that Sudeikis doesn't seem interested in doing more than probably 3 seasons of it, and maybe that's all we deserve. But I'm gonna be really sad when that one concludes, just because it is such a great mix of people and the writing is so spot on. And I mean, there are scenes from that we recite just out of whim, like
That
bits
has
about
been,
tea.
yeah, yeah, that
How do you
has,
take your
has softened.
tea?
I know there has been some softening of that in some of the
And my
subsequent
wife just did the
things.
line. Yeah.
I'm hoping it's tough. It must be tough for him and Coach Beard, who I'm sure has a real name,
Yes. Yes, he
because
does.
they film over here. That's the only way it ever works. Is
Right.
they film over here, and and they've done the right thing. They've done football okay.
Hmm.
Right, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. That's that's a big commitment to come over and
Yeah.
film over here. But yeah, so you take what we could get, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's remarkable that they created this off of what amounted to little 15 to 30-second NBC Sports explaining to Americans what the Premier League is.
Yeah,
When NBC got the rights to broadcast Premier League in the US, how do you introduce that to an American audience? And by the way, I've gotten hooked because it's on Saturday and Sunday morning, and it's super easy to turn on and watch in the background while you're doing other stuff. And, it's great. And when my son was younger, it was great too, because I didn't have to worry about, okay, what's he going to watch? What's he going to see? How many commercials are there? And the fact that they could take this little invented character and turn that into a series and have it work. I mean, when I first saw they did, I'm like, oh, this could be bad.
yeah,
And then I watched it, I'm like, oh my God.
yeah. It's yeah, remarkably well done. So that
Hmm.
cheers me up.
Yeah.
That's nice. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that as well. So we're gonna wait until it's all out,
Yeah.
and then binge it over a period of subsequent nights. So that's just how things have to be done.
And that that's another interesting thing. I bring up my teenager. You talk about your son, and I think some of the younger folks don't realize like how it used to work. That there were cliffhangers, and then you had to wait 3 months. And I think so many of these shows work better when you binge them because you see the arcs and you catch some more of the story. Like I very much want to go back and rewatch Sopranos, rewatch The Wire, rewatch Breaking Bad, just to see how much of that do you catch when you binge it versus when you watch them episodically over the course of months. But then you're also like, that's a huge time commitment. Christine and I went through Battlestar Galactica over the winter, and I did not fully appreciate how many hours of content that really was, to get through. But I think it is so much more cohesive when you can see it more or less fresh in your mind. And
Yeah, and you do wonder how much of that's changed how they create those shows.
Yeah.
Like with HBO stuff, if you're creating a series for HBO, it's going to come out weekly.
Right.
But you accept that some people are going to have access to it in different ways. Like with Mayor, we watched the first couple and thought, oh crap, we have to stop now, wait for it all to come out, and then we can binge it, right? But you go into that knowing it is primarily going to come out in kind of a weekly fashion. You do wonder that, does that change your mindset? I think that what you definitely see on the streaming services, which is kind of interesting, is you're no longer constrained with times.
Right.
You're not trying to nail that 43 minutes window that you need for a 1 hour broadcast TV, or whatever it is. So, and the skip recap button, right? Just genius. Whoever invented that, Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize, skip right there.
Intro.
Right?
Don't need to see that again.
Yep. I just watched it
until you just start sneaking something in there that I want to watch.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but it's been interesting. But it's I do also though wonder that when you binge something, like I know when I've read books in the past really quickly, the things don't stick with you as much.
Right.
And so I do wonder if that's why I have rewatched Parks and Rec like 4 times now, because when I did it the first time, or Community, Community is an incredibly dense show anyway, but I think because I binged it the first time, it's like it didn't stay around in my head as much. Whereas if it'd been that continual trickle out of episodes, then maybe they stuck better. I don't know.
Sure. Speaking of people I haven't seen in a while, Spencer Gibb is in our chat window here. Good morning. Well, good afternoon, Spencer. Time zones are hard, man. He's an hour ahead of me, so he's sitting there in Michigan, unless he moved on, which is possible. So, hi, Spencer. Glad you're with us. So maybe Spencer will have a question for Sam, or maybe he's not paying attention. I don't know. Beauty of live streaming, right? I think this is how it works, but
yeah, and that's been really interesting because I do lots of client work, right, where we're face to face. I know people are there, and I do like small class. When I'm doing, a small part of what I do is also training, and I do small groups. But even then, you do that webinar stuff. It's like you're just talking to a faceless bunch of people, and it's really difficult to know if anyone's there or not.
Right.
And that took me ages to retrain. So for a while, I had a little duck that I would put next to the camera.
Smart.
So I'd speak to the duck.
Smart.
And I've sort of got past that now. But it's been so long since I did a presentation in front of a real, like, honest to goodness audience. So it's gonna be weird when that all changes again.
Yeah, we were talking about that when we first hopped on today, and then I do think that's going to be really interesting to see what that's like, because I agree with you that it's a lot harder to talk to a screen than it is to a group of people. You don't get any of that energy reflected back. And I know I've mentioned this before, but I did one presentation where whatever technology we're using, I could see the person even though I was in presenter mode. And it was so energizing to see this individual reacting to my talk, and he had no idea that that's what was going on. But I was basically giving that talk to him. It was to his whole audience, but because I could see him nodding along and laughing, my energy just went way up. It is a lot harder to do this when you're just staring into the void and hoping people are on the other side of it. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what it looks like. And to your point about sort of lockdown number 4, 5, 6, I was very optimistic about the fall. I don't know if I'm as optimistic now. And a lot can change in a month or two, and but fingers crossed, that I'm back on your side of the pond sometime here in the next couple of months.
I committed to do one conference in person this year, and I did that. It's going to be end of November, and I agreed to do that back in March of this year. That's for NDC, an event I've been, you've been at before, and I've supported the NDC events quite a lot, and that's like Oslo in November, and I really hope it goes ahead, because that was the last event I did, was an NDC DevOps, and I did it as Oslo was shutting down. So I was doing a 2-day workshop, and then I was doing the keynote the next day. And while I'm in the second day of the workshop, one of the organizers ran and said, "Sam, I think you need to go to the airport because they're going to close the airports." So I literally finished up the workshop. I got home. I got my driver to come pick me up early, and I had to buy a bottle of champagne to come into London, especially for me. So that's fine. So last time I saw him, by the way, because I did not get on a plane since. Right. And then I got back in time to have a few hours sleep to then do the presentation remotely. So it ended up being, but even when I was in the workshop, I had about a third of my class, half my class there on the first day, and the other half were at home. So I was doing a hybrid in person, and then they drifted away. The second day, most people were at home. There's a few events that I've got which are hybrid. So I think Build Stuff is virtual, is hybrid this year. The smart thing about being hybrid, it means if your local conditions shut down, you're already set up for the online stuff.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be really interesting because I think the workshop stuff, it really suffers when you're not in person. Presentations, it's not anywhere near as big of a deal if you've got a halfway decent platform.
Right.
What you can't replace is the hallway conversations. Right. That's the big thing from a general conference point of view. I think in some ways an online presentation can afford in some situations to be better, but so I don't know. I suspect 2022 you'll see a lot of hybrid events. You'll see people set up for people being able to come, but people not being able to come either because they don't feel safe or they're not able to. And I reckon that'll be the case all the way through 2022.
And it'll be interesting to see what other aspects of conferences change. I've talked to people like Pratik, and others who organize these events, and Vincent and whatnot. And I suspect the buffet line is probably toast. That this is all going to be takeaway kind of things. And I wonder what other, we're going to see a lot more hand sanitizer around. And I also suspect masks are not going away. You may not see the near universal mask usage, but,
Well, I mean, look, that's a great sponsorship opportunity. I mean, the thing is, when you lose the buffet lunch, that's one of the big, I know people, again, this might be a bit too inside baseball, but, for conference organizers, and I've organized a few conferences myself as well, you need to bring money in.
Yep.
Even most of the conferences I've done work with, where I've helped organize them, have been not profit making. They're community events. You need to get a sponsor to sponsor the lunch to pay for the venue you're in, and that's opportunities potentially gone with that going. But you sell them give away a mask. We'll get mask printed with your logo on it. Right, quits in. I think that stuff's gonna be really interesting. I think there's But I think the other challenge with the online stuff really has been a lot of the platforms that I've been forced to use have been terrible. There are the video conferencing side of things is better in general, right? We've got Zoom, which for all its faults is probably the best,
right?
And then we've got other platforms that I won't mention, and that's fine. But when it comes to live events, it's a whole different world. I mean, you've got the sheer unmitigated disaster of Microsoft Teams live events, which once you get logged in is fine, but as a presenter, you're not getting logged in for at least a couple of days.
Right.
And then, but then you see people trying to create platforms designed for online events and conferences like Hopin, who I think are doing a really good job. Mm-hmm. They're trying to create virtual experiences, the nice back channel, but I can present on using something like this, and then I just splice that feed into that platform, and then you can do things like having producers count you in, and they've got a really good product up with Hopin, and I think we should see a couple more of those.
Right.
I think those will start needing to bridge that hybrid space. So how do I, when I'm actually at the conference, why don't I have the same platform as people that are at home, so we can all work together and it becomes a value add.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Well, and as we talked about earlier too, one of the advantages of this virtual world is we can be places that we may not be able to get to otherwise. I did a presentation last week for a client in, I think it was Jakarta, and that would have been a full week at least of my time to go over there. Yeah. And obviously we would have spliced in other events, but it's a big time commitment, and maybe we don't do it because, too booked, can't do it. But I can hop online for an hour, and that works out pretty well. And so I do think that's where we're still going to see a fair amount of that in 22 and beyond. It'll be interesting to see where the slider ends up.
For me, it's been huge because I'm certainly for sort of like community events, I'd always like to give my time for free if I'm able to. I work independently, so I do have to get paid for these things. So, but I'm happy to give my time for free when a local community event. But when I had to be there in person, I'd have to just turn those things down because I can't financially afford. I mean, even, best case, a lot of these conferences will often only cover, say, my flight and a hotel. Okay, but I'm still out of pocket for those days I'm not working. And I can afford to do a certain number of those things, but not many. Mm-hmm. But now I can just take an hour out of my day and hopefully do an event like that. And so I've been able to sort of do quite a lot more do events in a lot more different places for different people than I would have been able to. And it's financially, it's not zero pain, but it's much reduced pain.
Right.
I've actually, but to flip that around, if you're a conference who's making money, I'm charging you for my time now. I didn't used to do that either.
Right.
So that's also, I think, maybe a bit me growing up, which is like, if they're a really big conference company and I'm just Sam, maybe I should ask to get paid for my time. And it's like, wow. Like with the events that I organize. So as well as writing books, I'm the chair of a conference series, which I became chair of a conference series, and then they shut the conference down. But so we now do these online infrastructure and ops events. So every 2 months, we have like a half-day single-track conference, basically.
Yep.
So I put that agenda together, and but we pay people for their time, whoever they are, they get paid, and I think that's appropriate. O'Reilly makes money. I get paid for my time. Everyone gets paid for their time. Everyone knows where they stand. And that's actually been good for me because it's allowed me to continue doing the stuff I used to do when organizing conferences that don't exist anymore, but I'm still getting to go out and meet new speakers and bring them into those events. And again, we've been able to go a lot broader with our speaker pool.
Right.
Because, there are, I've got people who are parents who are at home, single parents in some situations where they can spend an hour and a half on doing a presentation, but the prospects of, if I wanted to get them to a conference,
right,
we would have to see, can we do it? Like, can we pay to bring your, in situations like that, we've brought families over and paid to bring children over and things for some of the events I've done in the past. But that's what they're in school right now. I can't do that. So that's been fantastic. Like being able to throw the net much wider in terms of people and time zones and experience levels as a result has been really, really beneficial. And also because, you can afford to take a risk on a speaker much more easily in this day and age because of that. Right.
Yeah.
So that's been really useful.
Yeah, you're not investing in travel and everything else. It's just the time, and that's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, it's also allowed us to reach audiences we couldn't reach before too, that were either encumbered by travel or cost, etc. It's allowed us to cast a much wider net as well, which I think is a positive too. But
well, here we are through the beauty of OBS talking to Twitch, right? So I'm assuming people are going to go back to watching PewDiePie in a minute after watching us.
Sure. 100%.
But it's definitely what's happening. Absolutely. Like, I mean, you may not have been able to justify your trip to Jakarta. I did a session. I was going to do.
I use your one about how big should a microservice be all the time now. And especially like the background, you have a very loud background and then you have a very colorful shirt on as well. And I say, yeah, I can't pull it off. Only
Well, I have wound that stuff back in. So yeah, I did a few YouTube videos, and the idea was I was going to be doing those on a regular basis. What basically happened was I really enjoyed that process, and I'm going to go back to doing those. But the only reason they stopped was just purely because I kind of realized I had a finite amount of creative energy in every given week.
Yep.
And that was either going into a video, which I enjoyed doing, or it went into finishing a book that I needed to get finished. So for me, I had to, I'm focusing it on the second edition of Building Microservices. And that's now, with that being, we're looking at, well, it will be done in about 2 weeks from now. And it will, as in it's in the final stage. It's going to the printers on the 23rd of July.
Congratulations.
Ted Lasso comes. Yeah, so it'd be great when it's done.
Oh, so Ted Lasso is your reward for getting it done.
Well, actually, my reward was I'm not allowed to play computer games while I'm writing the book. So I was allowed to start playing computer games again. And I'd already kind of, once I got the main thing done, I also got myself another reward. So I bought myself a 3D printer. So my 3D printer is actually whirring around the corner. So I get to have like a concrete financial reward, which is what I did. So so I really like, it's one of those things. I think someone once said, no one enjoys writing, but everyone enjoys having written.
Yes.
I'm not quite there. I actually do enjoy the process of writing. And with the first 2 books, I finished them just before I fell out of love with them. And this one, I think I've just managed it. But it got towards the end, it was getting a bit tough there, just to I can't see this anymore.
No, I don't think people fully appreciate how challenging it is to write a book, and that you sort of get to that point where you just want to kick it out. Like, I'm done. I'm ready to abandon you and move on. I'm tired of looking at this. and then the copy editor sends you a bunch of things, and you're like, oh, dear God, please no. I don't know how Venkat does it. I think about half the books behind me are Venkat's, and
Yeah.
he's remarkably lifelike, is all I can say.
Well, he's got like, I think he's found his groove. I was fortunate. I think I found my voice fairly early on. And so this is now my third book I've done. And and actually Venkat helped me find my voice. He was a reviewer for my first book. So he gave me some great feedback. I think I'm now starting to get some of the mechanical, logistical stuff down pat a little bit. I also control my variables.
Sure.
I don't do co-author books, right? Because I am a control freak and I only want to let myself down. So that's how I kind of constrain the work. And also, we just saying that. So I feel like I'm a lot better at the mechanical side of it, the logistical side of it again. And I also understand my own brain. Like if I want to write, the best thing for me to do is get up in the morning and not check my email.
Sure.
I go straight into writing and I'm going to run out of steam. I can do a few thousand words before lunch on a good day. But once I hit lunch, I am donezo. So that means that afternoon, that's when we're happening. So that took me 3 books and probably close to, I don't know, probably 400,000 words to have that realization. So now I suspect my 4th book will be a bit of an easier process. I mean, I'm planning that at the moment. But I really enjoy it because it's like you said, with this process, us having this chat was you creating an excuse to catch up with somebody.
Yep.
For me, the process of writing a book is me being very overt about having to order the thoughts in my head.
Right.
Having to work out how to explain them. And we do a little bit of that whenever we do a presentation, right? You're doing a part of that. You're sort of structuring ideas. So for me, it's more about spending time with the ideas and almost concretely saying, no, I'm allowed to do it because I'm creating something from it. So I really still enjoy that process.
That's remarkable because usually by the time you finish a book, the last thing you ever want to do is write another book. And so the fact that you're already planning another one, like tip of the hat.
Well, I've got 3 planned. So
well,
I'm doing them
already
but I'm doing them in order, right? But this is also part of my coping patterns. One of the things I realized very early on is the way that I kind of rein in how big things got. This book got too big. It got way too big. But part of the way I'd manage that is by saying, oh, it's okay. This content that I just wrote, I'm going to move it out. I'm not deleting that content. It's going into the next book. So for me, a lot of those ideas are, oh, this is where I'll address it. So coming out of the realization this book was too long was, okay, well, what my next book is going to be is I want to write not UML distilled. I want to write like NoSQL distilled, right?
Sure.
Which to me is like a perfect tech book. It's 100 pages. You get in, explains the ideas, it gets out. And, I know going into that, they had Martin's very good at that. This is how long we've got. So for me, that's the next book is going to be, I'm going to come up with that and stick the landing and I know what's going to go into it. So for me, it's just it's a different type of thing. One of the other books I want to write is a bit further off and it's going to require probably a couple of years worth of research and stuff in the background. And for me, it's also like saying, I've built writing a book into the rhythm of my work life now.
Right.
When I wrote my first one, I did it in my evenings and weekends, and it was brutal. For the first one, yeah. But for now, I have creative time blocked out in my calendar, which gets filled with a book or a video or something else, and starting to find that rhythm. And so, I'll do another one. And I don't know. We'll see what happens. As long as people keep wanting to read them and people want to keep them publish them, I guess I'll keep doing them.
You might as well.
Yeah. I mean,
as long as you got the energy, man. That's the hard part is just getting into it.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm just lucky. I guess I'm lucky in that regard. Again, because I don't work for a big company anymore. A lot of my creative energy went into writing emails. When I was in a big company. Now I'm not in a big company. I don't have to write long emails anymore. So I've got more typing energy, right? So I can put it into a book instead. I'm not writing code for a living anymore. So, do this instead.
Well, Spencer thinks the first time he had a conversation with you was at Java Day Ukraine back in 2017. Does that sound about right?
Oh, that could be right. Yes. No, I've been to the Ukraine twice. On one of those events was like quite a small conference. No, that was XP Day. I think the first time I was in there and we all got taken. It's like a half in Russian and half English. And when the Russian bits were on, we got packed off for a tour around the sites of Kiev, which is very nice. And I got to learn that you can, if you want to buy toilet paper with Vladimir Putin's face on it, Kiev's a great place to go.
Okay.
Yeah, so no, that would be right. Yeah, I remember that. I have very hazy memories of Java Days Ukraine. That'd be about right. I think that was probably the last time I was out that far east. In fact, I think I've done lots of work since in other places.
Speaking of
hi.
that, is there? He said, "Yeah, Spencer, you can ask questions too." I wish there was a way I could like go to Spencer and bring him in somehow. I don't. Maybe Layla will teach me how to do that, because that I think that would be kind of fun to like, hey, let's bring in another person and see what kind of trouble that gets us into. But is there any place that you're excited to get to go back to, or that, I mean, assuming things get normalized soonish, this is number one on the list or two on the list?
Well, I mean, Australia, because my wife's from there. I've got friends and family there, and this is not for a conference. It's just like we literally can't go to Australia right now. Like we can't go, and that may be the case well into next year. And so there's just pressing issues there anyway, beyond the fact that it's keeping me away from my beloved South Sydney Rabbitohs, and I haven't been able to see a game this year, which is depressing. In New York, purely because I get to New York and I have that 48-hour window thinking that this is awesome, I love New York. And then after 48 hours, I've eaten as much food as I can at the Breslin, and I'm like, this place is insane. Why doesn't it ever stop? I want to go now. But those first 24 hours, 40 hours, I love it. I still want to get myself to Japan. And I had the chance this year, would have been able to go, but unfortunately not. So hoping that's a place I'd like to be able to go. To be honest with you, there's nothing else that I've got a burning desire to. I absolutely need to go there. Sure. I think in my head, I've also realized that I can now just, I think it's, there's a place I definitely enjoy going back to and take opportunities. Whenever I get to go back to Copenhagen and Oslo, I love those things. And San Francisco's fun, right? I mean, it's just the biggest echo chamber in the world, right? And having watched all of NCIS New Orleans, which is the best NCIS by far, the rest of them are rubbish, fight me. NCIS New Orleans, it's not just because it's got Scott Bakula in it, but that's part of the reason. I do actually want to go visit New Orleans now. I mean, I wanted to anyway because of the music of Dr. John and stuff, but like, I'd like to go there now, right? So New Orleans is high on my list. I don't think there's going to be a tech event in New Orleans that's going to pay for me to fly me over, but you never know.
Talk to Pratik. He loves having excuses to go to New Orleans. So, and the food is wonderful. I will tell you that much.
Yes, that would definitely pique my interests. That's been one of the good things, one of the blessings in disguise here with the lockdown. If I'd been locked down in London, all the good restaurants I go would deliver. I moved out of London, a year before the pandemic happened. But a lot of the high-end restaurants now do delivery nationwide. So Angela Hartnett's place, for example, does delivery of pre-made foods, and you can get like Ottolenghi that will send you spiced chickens and stuff in the post.
Would you please order from Core on my behalf, because I get their emails and I'm desperately like, would you ship that to the US? Because I'd pay for it. I'd be cool with that.
I don't know how well some of those things will travel.
Not very, but it's the thought that counts.
Yeah. It's I mean, theoretically I can print chocolate on my 3D printer.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great, obviously, but it's sort of because you can. It's just it's what's called an FDM printer. Mm-hmm. So you can buy a hot end designed for chocolate printing, which theoretically has applications if you're doing sort of fairly high end kind of chocolate art, basically. Mm-hmm. I think it's all very theoretical at the moment, but I can imagine Heston's probably got a couple knocking around next to his battery of Thermomixes somewhere. We've when you come over, we have got some very good restaurants down here in the southeast. So we bought a house that's too big, and my son's now left, so we're in this house by ourselves. You come for a visit, and we'll take you some good seafood restaurants around here.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Well, assuming I can get into the country, I'm not sure what. Well, I know the Open starts off this week, and the protocols around that seem to be a little more stringent than normal PGA Tour events.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
keep seeing that players are dropping out left and right. I think Zach Johnson this morning announced he tested positive for COVID, and so he will not be making the flight over, which is interesting because he played all 4 days at the John Deere this weekend. So when did that positive test happen? But also makes you kind of go, so were you vaccinated? Because it's not the first PGA guy who had an issue with that. John Rahm lost about $1.5 million because he got vaccinated later than he should have and tested positive. So
Yeah,
you
well,
would think,
because he opens up the road for me because it's up in Sandwich, so
mm,
which is a stunning town. Do not even try and visit during the Open; it's
oh no,
absolute.
no,
But it is a beautiful town. It's a really interesting place. Beyond the fact it's partly where we get the name Sandwich from. It used to be a port, but then the port is no longer a port. It's a cracking town to come visit. But yes, even now you're seeing a lot more. There's a little bit of craziness already happens. We're far enough away that we're kind of hidden from all the chaos around there.
sure,
So yeah, it's been I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to get me back on a plane again. I think it's just being more selective now. I think
yeah,
I have to be careful about my health. So I'm double jabbed. I'm very fortunate. I've got my vaccines, but it doesn't mean I can't get it. It doesn't mean I can't theoretically spread it.
right,
So just having to be really careful and be really sensible. And I think that for that reason, the first conference that gets me on a plane is going to be with organizers of a conference that I trust,
right,
that I can chat to and understand what they've done, I've worked with before, because it's not just about me, it's also about the people that come to the event.
yep,
And if I don't think they're going to be looked after properly, I have a duty of care, right, to them
right,
in terms of events. That's the stuff that we haven't got into those really hard conversations yet. As I say, the reason I committed to doing NDC Oslo is just because I know the organizers really well, and they're brilliant people, and they do their best to run good events.
right.
And I've got a good working relationship with them, so I'm really hoping we can make that work. But it gets kind of interesting. I guess as well, because of your position inside Tanzu. I mean, if anything ever happened to you, they just fly in a private jet and a crack squad of elite commandos to extract you at a moment's
I mean,
notice.
maybe. I don't know. That's a great question. I think
I mean, they'll come for the sales reps, but if you're there as well,
right,
they'll take you
right.
too.
They'll take me along. They'll hide me in the back or something like, oh yeah, we got room for one more. Come on, but you have to leave your bags behind. Sorry.
Yeah. So to explain, he's sort of like Josh Long, but just not as important. So if we
Right,
can give him like so not the good commandos,
right.
the tier 2 commandos can come get him.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Josh, I think they would emergency evac. Me, they're like, I figure it out. You got your phone. You'll be fine.
I'm pretty sure that Rick or Morty style, there's actually a whole vat of backup Josh Longs in a cloning machine somewhere, because that might explain how he and Venkat managed to get around as much as they used to anyway.
Yeah. See, again, I say it. I'll say it one more time. Venkat is remarkably lifelike, and I assume that there are multiple instances. It's like Westworld. There are multiple instances of Venkat in the wild, and you only interact with one at a time, but they're all sort of hive mind together, or perhaps more like the resurrection ship in Battlestar Galactica. Maybe that's really what we're dealing with. I don't know. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And Josh and I have actually talked a bit about that, and I think he's kind of in the same boat that I am. That once we get back to normal, it's not going to be as much travel as before. That
No.
there's everybody that I've talked to that had our lifestyle is talking about cutting back to some extent.
There was James Governor over at Red Monk, who I know pretty well, and Carla from Container Solutions. They put together some really nice connected discussions across a lot of the DevRel people. And I'm sort of not in the DevRel space, but I kind of just piggybacked on some of those things. And we've had this brewing for a while before the lockdown, was just stories of the burnout in people doing roles like yourselves, and some of the horror stories coming out of some of the DevRel firms. There was a reckoning coming, I think, with those people anyway, and burnout in the tech sectors is especially bad. So if what this is as a correction, so people doing these roles can be more effective and actually have a better,
quality of life,
not work-life balance, but just health and sanity. I think that's positive, right? And I think the fact that it might be hard to convince a tech company that this is possible, but they've been forced into realizing it's possible.
right?
And so I think that's just good all around. I
Right.
think that's just positive all around. Um, I think it's kind of, that was the interesting thing for me, was even when I, like, if I overworked myself, I can only blame my boss, and I am my own boss.
Right.
So it was really interesting that I would just push myself too much.
Yeah.
And like my wife, runs the company with me now. She basically came in, and we now kind of balance each other in terms of that work. But you kind of do need sometimes someone to just say, yeah, you could cut back a little bit. And
Right.
it's rare a kind of company that will do that for you.
Right.
I've been really interested into a lot of the companies now. Like I think Microsoft Tokyo did some really interesting, I think it was mostly Japan, full stop maybe. They did their 4-day week experiment, where they found that they produced, their productivity increased, not on a per day basis, but they produced more in 4 days than they did in 5.
Wow.
And people were happier. There was less burnout, and it just works better.
Right.
But I know you can't have those conversations with firms in the US, because you get, like, I think you get 1 day holiday per person per year. That's
Yeah,
how
I
it
think most
works.
people get, if you're lucky, you get like 2 weeks of vacation, and there are a very small smattering of true public holidays. We just had one last week, would have been the 5th, because July 4th fell on a Sunday. But with the except, there's Memorial Day, Labor Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas, January 1st, and then that's kind of it. I mean, there's a few others here and there, but that's pretty rare, for people to get more than 8 or 10 holidays and 2 to 3 weeks of vacation. I mean, it's so funny when you talk about, your son having 6 weeks, and it's like, for most US people, they're like, 6 weeks? What kind of crazy talk is that? And I do think that's one of those things that we could learn from other places
Yeah.
on how to do this a little better. But certain people have different views on that in the C-suite. But
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also a cultural thing. I mean,
yeah,
it's not like, it is very much and the US again is sort of an odd outlier in that sense still, which is, if you're fortunate enough to work for the big tech companies, to kind of have to change how they work because they have people in other countries, and they're like,
right.
hey, it's way better over in Australia. And it's like, okay, maybe we should do the same here. Uh, but I think I think for a lot of people, they still equate, say, programming as typing.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
still see it as effectively manual labor, whereas it's kind of not. So yeah.
No, I agree. I agree. Well, my friend, I know you have to go. So
I do.
congratulations again on the book. I'm very excited for that to come out here in just a couple short weeks. That is awesome.
Yep.
And, I'm again amazed that you're already thinking about, the next set of books, which I guess we'll have to say you're remarkably lifelike as well.
Well, thank you. But if people want to know more about how to get hold of the second edition, you can read it in early access now over at O'Reilly.com. But if you go to my website, which is samnewman.io, I'm very easy to find on the internet. There's all the information there. But yeah, we should chat more. Happy to do
Yes,
another these in the future. You just
absolutely.
let me know and we'll set something up.
I will do. And I thank you for your time, my friend. And, hopefully I get to, buy a cup of coffee and or dinner and or all of the above sometime in the very near future. And, until then, I thank you for your time. And next week I have my dear friend Asta will be joining me. So she is
Oh,
just a
awesome.
wonderfully creative individual who I used to pantomime that we'll all be working for Asta someday. So I'm curious to see where she is on her world domination tour. So normally I would have caught up with her in New York 3 or 4 times, but pandemic. So, well, thank you again, my friend, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
All right. Take